Okay, it looks like we should be going.
Well, thank you so much, Summer. Thank you, council and staff, for moving through our pre-council workshop, but it is now 7:05, and I will call this regular council meeting to order. Summer, please take us through a roll call attendance of the staff and council that are with us this evening.
Okay, I have Mayor Emily Niehaus. I have Council Member Karen Guzman-Newton, City Manager Joel Linares, Carly Castle, Assistant City Manager, Kaylin Jones, Moab City Council, Lori Simonson, City Attorney, Mike Duncan, Moab City Council, Ronnie Duressery, Moab City Council, and Tawny Knutson Boyd, Moab City Council.
Thank you so much. Section 3 of our agenda, citizens to be heard. We are receiving public comments by phone and online through Zoom. We are limiting comments to 2 minutes per commenter. We're going to be bringing people into the room now that would like to be a citizen to be heard. If you are listening to me talk and you are on the YouTube, you might already be ready to go and talk. So please, if you are following through YouTube, but you do wish to be a citizen to be heard, now is the time to transition over to listening on Zoom and not on YouTube. We also received 18 written comments for our meeting this evening. I just want to thank the community members that have provided us with written comments. And now we will transition into our citizens to be heard through Zoom. And Summer, I'm just going to go through with who I see in the order of my screen. And first up is Bruce Huntington. Welcome to our meeting this evening. It's nice to see you.
Yeah, it's good seeing you again. Thank you. I appreciate this. Mayor Niehaus and Moab City Council, I just wanted to tell you, thank you so much for letting me join this meeting. It's going to be brief. Really, all I wanted to talk about was the noise ordinance and working together, okay? I know that you and I have met with Kent Green and we've gone over some things, and I really think that we can come up with some good solutions to help with this that you guys have there in Moab. Since we've spoken, we've created a task force. And when I say we, I'm talking some of the OHV members of different groups and whatnot. And the goal of that task force is to work together with Moab and Grand County so that the citizens living there, working there, and playing there can all get along and have, a fun time doing it without a lot of complaints. I just wanted to touch real fast. We aren't the lawless group that the Grand County Attorney, Christina Sloan, called us out to be. We don't want to go there and rip it up, tear up the environment or anything like that, or cause any undue stress for you and your citizens. We're here to help. We do have some solutions that we hope that we can bring to the table and have some good dialogue between us and the city and council. Again, thank you. I'm just going to wrap it up now, but I appreciate it.
Well, thank you. And thank you for your continued willingness to talk and be able to.
Do you have his contact information?
I do.
Okay, we can share that with me?
I will.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Joel. And thank you, Bruce, for calling in to speak.
You're welcome.
Next up, Judy Powers. And you are muted, Judy, so unmute yourself and welcome to our meeting.
Hi, I'm Judy Powers, and I just want to say a couple things. I am sorry the UTV curfew didn't go through. And I do think that we might be able to have a slight paradigm shift. I really like the idea of increasing our businesses in town, which also means providing UTV shuttles instead of having more asphalt and having bigger parking lots. I think that's going to be a real problem down the line with huge trailers. I mean, the parking's already problematic in places where they have parking. I think I would like us to really think about how we can create more businesses in town. And that includes, I really like the idea of somehow enforcing more guided rides around town with the UTVs that come through, because I appreciate what the gentleman just said, but I have seen so much damage in the last few years, and this last year has been outrageous in Sand Flats and the Monitor Merrimack area, and I could go on. I try not to even go there. So I like the idea of having changing it so that we can have the noise ordinance be able to be something that we can stop just for that instead of as a secondary. And I believe you're working on that. That's my understanding. I am a little concerned about the civil enforcement. I think it sounds like a fabulous idea, but my experience having lived here for 30 years is that code enforcement has never worked. It has always been it's just always been a problem in terms of dogs, in terms of anything. So I hope it works. I think it's a great idea. I think it's highly problematic. So far, as I understand it, we've never really been able to find people that have been willing to do code enforcement. And it sounds like from the talk I just heard, it's somewhat dangerous. So, and again, as we all know, the noise, it's not, as we all know, it's not just one vehicle, it's the quantity of vehicles. So I don't know how we address that with that whole checking each vehicle. Although it would be great if when there's, one of my friends said she was riding her bike on Spanish Valley Drive and 47 UTVs passed her in an hour. So it isn't one at a time. It's often, I would really hope that we can test all of the outfitters in town. I understand the idea of labeling, but to me, labeling them just because they have a business in town doesn't work for me if they have really loud vehicles. And it seems to me that if they do what they say, a lot of them say they do, which is sell them every year, I would really encourage us to transition them to quieter vehicles, which would not only help the businesses, but all those people that buy them and come back, they would have quieter vehicles too. So I think that would make a huge difference in what's going on here. I happen to support the limiting the fleet size. I mean, I think you can find some kind of appropriate number. And I don't think you can just say they can't add any more. I think you have to have a number where they can have it. But I guess if they were all really quiet electric UTVs, maybe I wouldn't care about that. And my one other comment is I haven't heard anybody complain about water bottles or hiking boots or coffee shops or whatever people keep bringing up. I only hear and read about UTV complaints. Almost every single letter to the editor is about UTV noise. And again, I'm sorry to say it, but I haven't read any letters about complaining about water bottles or hiking boots or any of the other businesses that are going on. So I'd really like us to really understand that this is a serious, pretty much issue about UTVs and other loud. I mean, I've heard some pretty loud trucks, and I also really don't like the semis that continue to go through red lights on the highway.
Judy, I'm going to say thank you. And I'm also going to encourage you to speak at our public hearing as well.
Okay.
You and others, Bruce and others, as we are going to have a public hearing on this very topic as well.
I heard that.
Thank you. Comments. Thank you so much. We will move on to Chris's iPhone. I know so many Chris's. I wonder which Chris this is. Chris's iPhone. Chris, you are up. Who might you be? So exciting. Okay, we're going to move on to Brian. I know a lot of Brians too. I wonder which Brian this might be. Brian, if you can hear me, go ahead and unmute and you can be heard now. I wonder if they're at the YouTube lag. Let's try phone number with an area code 303, which I think is Colorado. Yeah. Phone number with an area code 303. I know some Coloradans that have moved to Moab. Which citizen might you be? Oh, we lost Chris. Yes.
Am I unmuted?
You are unmuted. Welcome to our meeting. Please state your name.
Emily, I'm Shane Firestack, and I live just outside of the city, down by the golf course. So
Shane,
I'm
welcome.
local, and I am a UTV enthusiast.
Welcome.
And I do ride my UTVs on the road. I am, however, in favor of some kind of noise ordinance. However, what I don't want to impose is an ordinance on people who are trying to abide by what the city needs and what they want, because I truly believe that some of these are noisier than can be. Mine, however, yeah, I put a little bit bigger tires on, but I do not modify the exhaust. I do not put any tuners. I do not make them any louder than they have to be. And I believe they are loud, and I'm not trying to make them any louder. I'm concerned about being in the county and the city and not being able to ride my vehicles to the trails instead of having to go get a trailer and take these to all the places that we love to go because we enjoy to recreate in and around our city. We certainly do not we do not encourage any of these folks that want to ride loud vehicles, noisy vehicles, create trash on the trails. We are always out. We never leave the house without a garbage bag. We always pick up garbage. We are very, very, very responsible in our rides. And I would just like to encourage the city and the county to let us folks who do care about everybody. We stop when hikers are by. We stop when they're horse riders. We stop when they're bike riders. We don't want to hurt anybody, and that is my plight, and I ask that you consider that.
I'm so grateful for your comment tonight. Thank you for calling in, and thank you for sharing that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, and now to Brian. I see we have a participant named Brian. We'll give Brian just another few seconds. Summer, is there a way to unmute Brian in case he's got a complicated mute situation?
I've requested to have him unmute, but no response.
Well, I think he has been on long enough that if there was a YouTube lag, he'd probably be with us. I'll just give him another few seconds. Brian, if you can hear me, go ahead and unmute your computer so that you can be a citizen to be heard. Okay, well, I think what we need to do is move on here. Summer, I'm not sure if we're going to just leave Brian. Oh, he's gone. Okay. Let me know if he pops back into the waiting room. Otherwise, we will move on from citizens to be heard. And as always, I'm very grateful when people call in to be a citizen to be heard on Zoom. It is complicated. So thank you all for calling in and Zooming in, and also for the 18 written comments that we received. We are now in section 4. Unless Summer, I shouldn't be moving on.
I just had an iPhone pop in. Hang on just a second.
We can try this one more time. Okay, iPhone's in. Welcome. Oh, you are muted. Go ahead and unmute.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now. Welcome.
All right. Hi. So I have been seeing that the city is doing something. I've seen a lot of police going up Mill Creek now that from the last time that I had talked on here. I've been racking my brain to figure out a solution to all of this crap that's going on. One of them that I have figured out is from the, is it Google Earth Pro or whatever? It shows the property lines and the county lines and the BLM lines. We can get a road cut in to Sand Flats that meets in with Hell's Revenge right off the river road. It'll take a little bit of money, yes, but since Moab has, and the county has decided not to allow any new jeeping trails in at all, I've talked to many people. I've got businesses on board. I've got tons of locals on board with this idea. But there is a way. I went out there yesterday, and there is a way that we can excavate a road that will connect into Hell's Revenge Jeep Trail. There is no private property that would be crossed. Right above Matrimony Springs is Grand County property, and then right behind that is BLM property. So I believe that we can get a new road cut into there. Like I said, I've gotten tons of different businesses on board, not just jeeping businesses and rental ones, but like Clark's Auto Body part store. He's on board with it. And I mean, just tons and tons and tons of people are on board with this. So, I mean, I've been racking my brain to figure anything out that will not take the UTVs completely off the roads, but we can redirect them to a new road instead of the old dump road.
Okay.
I mean, that's just something I've been thinking about.
I appreciate that thought. And if you want to share that in an email to council and staff, that would be helpful. And thank you for calling in with your comment tonight. We appreciate it.
And then one more would be the dump that's up there. It's almost to max capacity. So why don't we move the dump and turn that into a parking lot that they can trailer their vehicles up to that point and then drive from there up. So just, I've been racking my brain just to figure anything out. And that's what I've come up with.
Thank you so much for calling in and sharing that.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, thanks.
Next up is Mike Utley. I don't know how to pronounce your last name, Mike.
Oh, that's okay. My name is Mike Utley, and
welcome.
Thank you. I know that I didn't read anywhere that only citizens of your city could comment. I'm actually not, but I am a regular visitor to your city. And anyway, so, you know, my voice probably doesn't count as much as somebody who lives in your city, and I understand that. But I did want to make a few comments about the UTV noise. And I am a UTV owner, and I like to recreate that way. And I appreciate you guys taking the time to listen to these comments. One thing that I think is important is to not discriminate against specific types of vehicles. And I think that's where a lot of the backlash came from the bill that was run, SB 168. I think the UTV community felt a little attacked in that way. And I know there are some people that make a lot of noise, don't get me wrong. And I don't like that. And I don't want to, I personally don't like to make other people feel uncomfortable in their own homes. I think if a more strict noise ordinance were to be passed and make it so that people can be pulled over because they are too noisy, I think that would go a long way. And I think the general consensus in the UTV community as a whole is that we don't want to cause problems. We want we want the citizens of Moab to enjoy living there and not hate us. We want everyone to be able to recreate equally. And I know we're not like technically a protected class, but I think in general, like, it's good to apply laws equally to everyone. And so that would be my recommendations.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you for calling in and sharing your thoughts with us tonight.
Great.
Okay, who is next? 435-220-0746. Welcome.
Are you there? Can you
Yeah.
hear me?
Is this a
All right,
cowboy?
good. This is the cowboy. First of all, I wanted to comment that after watching the county council Zoom meeting last week, I've got to tell you folks that as a city council, you're very professional, and I appreciate that. We may not all agree on certain issues, but I want you all to know that you are very professional. I won't comment anymore on that. But I've been doing some checking. I've been calling, trying to find out the problem neighborhoods and even those who dislike UTVs. And one of the things that came to mind is I did my own investigation. Is a lot of traffic is received on 4th East. Granted, we get traffic from the state highway up through the neighborhoods, but it ends up on 4th East. And a lot of these people who are in side-by-sides and other vehicles, I may add, have GPS units. And what this GPS unit does, it takes them to the shortest route. And I think that's the reason why we're getting an influx of traffic in the neighborhoods on the east side, especially up in Locust Lane and you know, I'm going to say Rose Tree and Tusher and all that area up in there. But I noticed one thing. There is no signage on these blocks directing people to the corner of Dave's Corner Market to make that left-hand turn to go up to the Slick Rock Bike Trail or the Sand Flats Recreation to access trailheads such as Hell's Revenge and Fins and things. I think if we could put some signs up there, giving them direction, I think you're going to see less traffic in your neighborhoods. And I think, Emily, if I'm correct, you live up there in Locust Lane. Am I correct?
I do.
Okay. But do you understand where I'm coming from on that?
Yeah, and I appreciate that comment. I think when somebody directs people to drive by my house on purpose, no sign's going to keep them away from doing that. But I do appreciate your comment, and I do think signage is important. So yeah, I'm grateful for you to call in about that. Thank you.
Dude, I just have a couple more, and I won't take any more of your time.
Sure.
I've noticed with the speed limit signs going up to Sand Flats, and I don't know if this is city or county, we're at 15 miles an hour. It's always been 15 miles an hour to all vehicles to the top of to where the dump is until you get to the cattle guard. And now you have OHV sign that says 15 miles an hour and 25 miles an hour for regular traffic. I don't know if you guys realize, but this is a double yellow line. And that goes all the way up to where the entrance is, to the guard shack is what we call it. And what's happening is we're getting citizens who are in full-size four-wheel drives or cars or whatever they're in are being held back. And I don't know if this is being done intentionally because I know there's a law, and you might ask Brett about this, but Chief Brett, but there is a law there that you can't intentionally impede traffic. A municipality can't do that unless you have the proper laneage. So you might want to check into that just in case, because there is no place for those who are going 15 miles an hour, because you're asking them to do that, to pull off to the right and get out of the way. And so now what we're experiencing illegal passage. We're getting yelled at and flipped off and almost hit head on by oncoming traffic so others can swerve in between us. So that's something you guys might want to look into and check into because that is putting people in danger by doing that. And of course, we have the individual on the corner of Mill Creek and Murphy Lane who is now stepping out, yelling and screaming at side-by-side owners and at tour operators, but that's another thing I understand. We'll have to call the city police to do that, to get him to quit harassing us.
Okay,
somebody's
thank you.
experience.
Thank you for your comments, Kent.
Thank you, but that's what I thought I'd say. And y'all have a good night.
You too. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Next up, Bud Brewing.
Can you hear me, Emily?
I can hear you.
All right. Sorry, I'm actually out of the country. So if I do not come through clear, I apologize. I did not know that I would be able to get online tonight. So I do want to reiterate Kent's
Hey, Bud, just
professionalism.
for everybody, do you mind introducing yourself so that others might know who you are?
Absolutely, I don't mind at all. Sorry about that. I should have led with that. My name is Bud Bruning. I am president of UTV Utah, and we are Utah's largest off-road group. We represent about 25,000 families in the state of Utah and about 250,000 registered OHV owners in the state. And I do appreciate the professionalism of the city council. It is a breath of fresh air to hear the dialogue that's taking place and the professionalism that has taken place. And so I do want to thank you from all OHV owners that we do appreciate it. I do want to reiterate to the community, to the mayor, I've met with Emily. She's awesome. She does want what's best for her constituents. And I really do know that, Emily. I just want you to know that. I know a lot of stuff gets said back and forth, but I appreciate your efforts. We may not agree on how to get there, but I think we agree on the end result. And I think we want what's best for the community. We want what's best for all residential people. That includes businesses that are UTV businesses or OHV friendly. And I want the community to know that we want to help with solutions. We want to help you guys keep the noise down. We don't want to be the annoying people on the block. We don't want to get yelled at for driving down the road. We want to help you come up with solutions. And I think Kent presented a good one, which is some signage. I think there's a lot of other things that we can do and that we can help with, but we would love to be included in some of those discussions. I think that maybe some voluntary, hey, let's not drive at night. Hey, let's, the noise or the speed limit one is tricky. Kent brings up some good points, and those are things that I had not considered when I thought that 15 miles per hour would be a good option. And so maybe it's not everywhere that will work, but some voluntary, quiet times and some other options, I think would be a great idea. I also think that we hear the term bad apple a lot, and I would love to see some of these bad apples cited and have their vehicles impounded, because these people give us a bad name and we don't appreciate it. We love to abide by the law. We don't want to be the bad neighbor or the bad person. And so I would like to see, if somebody's being obnoxiously loud, I would like to see these people cited. And I just want everybody to know we're on your side. We want to help you create solutions. We're not against you. We want to help out. And so I appreciate your time. I appreciate everybody listening to me. You didn't have to let me in. I'm not a Moab resident. I do have members that are, so I'm speaking on their behalf. And I really appreciate the time, and thank you.
Okay, thanks for calling in, Bud. Looks like maybe a relative. Josh, I have not met you yet. You are free to unmute and share a comment with us tonight. Oh, no, Josh. I wonder if there was a just in case call there. We'll move on to White. White is gone. White is gone black. Okay. Summer, are there any other citizens to be heard in the waiting room?
I have no one else waiting to speak.
Okay. Well, we're going to move on now that it's already 7:34 as well. So we're going to move on. I again appreciate all the citizens that have called in and written to be heard, as well as members of other communities. Okay, moving on to administrative reports. Joel? Section 4 of our agenda.
I will be quick. Tomorrow and Thursday night from 6 to 9, we have strategic planning with the council. We've ready to do that. We don't have anyone else really presenting here tonight to save time because we have so many meetings in a row, and we are also going to be talking about a lot of the same things there. The legislature did last week. We are working on getting you guys a report on what things that changed that affected us. It's going to take us a little bit of time as there's a lot to do there, but we're working on that. We're working budget. An update on the art trails and the vandalism. We have submitted charges filed against an individual for who we suspect caused the damage to the art. And at a later time, if those charges are filed, we'll be releasing that information. But right now we're still in the charging phase. And so we're gonna wait for the charges to get filed. Kelly and Lisa here at City Hall have been working on a newsletter for residents. We're working on getting that put together and getting ready to send that out. City Hall COVID-19 update is open to the public as far as coming into the treasurer's office, paying a bill or getting information. The City Hall itself is open to the public. The other departments, we ask that you phone ahead and make an appointment. So we're ready for someone to come in and we can take precautions and set things up before that. But we are open to the public for payments and for entry. And if you want an appointment, please call and make that appointment. And that's all I got tonight, Mayor.
I appreciate that, Joel. And I do just want to reiterate what you said. This council does have a meeting, a 3-hour meeting tomorrow, and then a 3-hour meeting again on Thursday. So as we are moving now into mayor and council reports, I'm going to be the briefest of the brief because I do think that we will be discussing quite a bit over the next 2 days. But I will just report out. So we're in section 5 of our agenda, mayor and council reports. I'll go first. I attended lots of legislative things and the legislative session is over and we will be having a discussion. But Joel, I do appreciate the staff recap of all things legislative session that will be impacting us, a report for that. I attended a water quality board meeting, a Southeastern Utah Association of Local Governments meeting, and meetings around the Mill Creek Community Collaborative, which is working hard at coming up with and finalizing the recommendations to the city, the county, and our public land managers as to how to approach our congestion in the Powerhouse Lane, Mill Creek area. I've had meetings around it, but I've been making a point to at this final phase of the process, step back and allow the recommendations to come in as we, as a council, will be set to review what has been collected and disseminated by a very large group of stakeholders. So I'm very excited for the Mill Creek Community Collaborative leadership to host them at a council meeting and have them present to us the recommendations so that we can move forward with what we can do as a city and how we can support the other agencies in solving for the congestion around Mill Creek. And then also attended a regional transportation plan meeting. Kaylin, I'm just gonna let you report out on that because I assumed you were gonna say a few things anyway. So unless you really want me to say some thoughts, I think there are a couple of things that are important to share, especially around the bypass. I'm just gonna kick that football to you and say, Ronnie, you're next.
Sorry, I'll try to be brief too. Thanks to everyone who worked on the legislative session, the mayor and Joel and Carly and Lori and Kaylin on the legislative committee especially, and to our citizens who I know were just trying to track bills like crazy and sharing information, and thank you, that's very helpful. I don't know how many we had total this year. It was probably like I don't know, 1,000 or something, and goodness knows one person can't follow all that. I just had a little update. Often this time of year, Joette Langanese and Mary McGann and I go back east to lobby for UMTRA funds, and due to COVID, we'll be doing that kind of from here, but there may be a trip in the fall to meet with the Department of Energy, so I'll update you guys as that gets closer. Mostly I've been attending Utah League of Cities and Towns Legislative Policy Committee meetings and sometimes the daily update calls, which I found very interesting. So maybe we can discuss people participating next year. I know the mayor's often on them. I find them rather intriguing in a nerdy way. Attended with, I'm sure several of you did as well, your own interview with the finance director candidate. I did send you guys a Leave No Trace poster that was shared with me that the Travel Council and some federal land agencies have created. And so I'm hoping that the city might be able to post that in some places as well, just to help with the consistent messaging.
I responded to that and let you know, we'll post it in all of those.
Oh, thank you. I saw that. I just thought I'd let you share with the group. Thank you. And then I just had 2 resident questions that I was just hoping at the end, maybe Mike might be able to respond to one, and then maybe at the end, Joel. And one was a water question from a resident who's just wondering if we know anything more yet about water restrictions for Moab this year, because they're concerned about lack of precipitation and how that might impact it. And they're just trying to be responsible about their landscaping choices. But anyway, they were hoping to know before they started prepping their yard this spring. And the other one was a fire question, and just a request that we'd gotten about whether we could revisit our fire restrictions for this coming year, since it's already so dry. And so I was just going to pass those 2 on. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you, Ronnie. Mike.
Ronnie, so Ken's snowpack is 22% below normal this year. Ken's Lake is basically dry right now. The county's attempt to lease a well has not worked. The well turned out to be rusted away. So it doesn't look too great. Moab Irrigation Company tries to supply all their users 100%, but it typically means pumping through much of the summer, and it does not look good this year. So I wouldn't be surprised to see conservation efforts there as well. I did do a long interview in 2 sessions, actually, with a young woman who's a journalist for KUER, Salt Lake public radio station, about water stuff. And she kept trying to pin me down about stopping growth. And I kept saying, well, if water is a finite resource, it will have an impact on growth, but not going to be me that says we're going to stop growth, because it really can't happen. So I tried to explain private property laws and why that can't happen, and probably it's not a good idea that it didn't happen in its entirety, certainly, but it isn't. It is a different paradigm. And finally, I went to the. I'm happy to report I went to the Moab Multicultural Center. Had a open house for their brand new yurt. Back behind the main building is a lovely building, and I'm so pleased for them. And so it was nice to participate in that. So there you go.
Thank you, Mike. Also, thanks to staff for helping the multicultural move through the regulations to make the yurt functional. Next up, Tawny.
I don't have anything.
Well, that's brief.
Next week.
Karen. Oh, really? You're going to make me say it? You're muted. Yeah, I said it. I said it before, and I'll say it again.
Dang it. Okay, so let's see here. Chamber board meeting. They were very excited to hear about the communications effort and willingness from the city to have more engagement with businesses. That was at my meeting. We had an airport board meeting. We discussed halting new hangar expansion for a few years until proper infrastructure can be put into place and there's a cohesive plan, because right now it's a little willy-nilly. And so the airport director is really trying to have focused growth up there. Flights will begin flying to Salt Lake City on May 5th, once a day, and there's flights are still flying to Denver twice a day. I had a chamber retreat all day last week, and we were working on goals and planning efforts for 2021. We all attended a ribbon cutting ceremony for the Element Hotel. We have a new chamber president, which is Lonnie Campbell. Congratulations to Lonnie. And let's see here. I participated with a conversation with Governor Cox and the ULCT members. He gave a lot of great information to those in attendance that the conflict between legislators and local leaders not always having the same interests in mind, and the tensions between our representatives. And Governor Cox wanted just to remind us that legislators they're looking at issues through a state lens, and housing is the second biggest major crisis outside of the pandemic. There's only 2,000 homes for sale in the state at this time. Governor Cox talked about his plans for GOED and adding planning to the efforts up at the state, because we are growing so quickly, populations are exploding, and the cities don't have the resources. So he's going to try to give resources to all communities and adding incentives to rural areas outside of the Wasatch Front. He mentioned that there's close to 70 bills in this year's legislation in regards to law enforcement, and he wanted to send a big shout out to all law enforcement and their willingness and gracefulness in dealing with the laws that were trying to be passed. The session was also really good for outdoor recreation, and state parks and trails will see an increase, and the state is recognizing the economic development piece to outdoor recreation, so we can continue to see grants for non-motorized and actually motorized recreation. Speaking of that, I contacted Tara McKee with the Utah Outdoor Recreation Department regarding available grants for pickleball development for our community. And she put me in touch with Susan Zarakarizi with the Land and Water Conservation Fund. And actually Susan called me within 5 minutes, and she said that their grant funding is, for the last couple of years, is almost exclusively been for pickleball courts. So if we are interested in following that route to try to get a 50-50 match for funding, she'd be willing and able to try to help us with that. I attended the CAS meeting. Mostly the first part of it was the legislative recap for Colorado. In the afternoon, there were sessions from NAR and Mountain Pact. And afterwards, I called Jake Powell from USU, who is one of the directors for NAR, and just to try to talk, because he sparked a bunch of amazing ideas. And one of the biggest things that he was talking about is not losing our sense of place in resort communities. And so I called him to talk about potentially the creation of a coalition of similar towns in Utah. CAST is super effective, and they're very effective in dealing with their state legislators because they have a unified, powerful voice. And ULCT tries to garner that support, but I think we can do a better job because I think we have seen that we don't necessarily, we're not in line with some of our representatives. I attended the Milk Creek Collaborative Community Meeting, and Emily, like you mentioned, the group is preparing right now to share their work and their recommendations. Mary McGann was in the meeting as well, and we were thinking that possibly if they were to share that information to both the city and the county at the same time during a joint meeting, if we could organize something like that. And then I will be done. Worked with Lacey Shumway, the director of the Chamber of Commerce, and we are going to try and have a open dialogue with businesses. And I've extended the invitation to the Make Moab Quiet Again group to have a luncheon, just open discussion to talk about solutions for ATV usage in the community. And Ashley Kornblatt, who's a new chamber member, has accepted being the mediator for that discussion. So that will take place probably next Tuesday at noon. And as soon as I have information, I can share it. So that's it.
Thanks, Karen. Kaylin?
I attended a couple legislative group meetings as well as side conversations. Thanks to everyone who participated in that effort. Seems like it turned out as good as it could under the circumstances. I attended a housing task force meeting, finalized priorities for 2021. I attended a travel council meeting. Jennifer Jones gave a presentation, which took up much of it, and it was very interesting to see. It was a repeat from a previous CAST meeting to a large extent, but it is striking getting the some images of the impacts of tourism and just the sometimes the disparity between the BLM resources to manage it and just the sheer number of visitors and their trash and impacts. But they're doing a great job. And then I attended the possibly last meeting of the Regional Transportation Plan stakeholder meeting. The attendance has slipped a little bit. This has been going on for over half a year. And it seems like what was presented has been both described as a draft plan and a final plan. It was the first time the stakeholders had seen it. We apparently have until April 6th to give input. They had taken a discussion that we had last time about which projects to include and rank them by a somewhat opaque process. And then the project list that was included is fine for the most part. It's kind of what you would expect. Some of the most substantive work is a couple of major frontage road development on South Highway 191, as well as two of the proposed hotspots projects, the transit study and Spanish Valley trail system, as well as studying or developing some shorter trail components. And then they included also the bypass, which it's like every time we talk about this, it really sucks all the air out of the room because it's so contentious, which is unfortunate because then we don't have time to focus on refining all the other projects and potential good work that can come out of this. So it was a little bit of a mixed message. They tried to downplay it, but they did say, like, parts of the plan say on the alignment identified in the bypass study, and they said, oh no, we haven't committed to that. But then they would also say it's a placeholder until we get to NEPA, where it'll be, we'll really figure it out. But a NEPA EIS isn't a decision-making tool. It does not prohibit an agency or permittee from harming the natural or human environment. It only requires that they disclose the impacts and that they're understood and possibly mitigate them within the cost and schedule of the project. So it seems like despite discussing this repeatedly amongst ourselves in public meeting, they're not getting the message. I think we also know that we have a traffic problem and that we do need to, within the best of our ability, provide leadership on solving it and providing a better downtown experience. And the bypass ends up being perceived as a silver bullet, and the bypass study did not demonstrate that it was silver at all. So I will follow up with this at our strategic plan planning meetings. That's what I've got.
You didn't want to say anything else about that at this time? Nudge.
Pardon?
I'm nudging.
Okay.
You to say one more thing.
I will have a draft resolution for you to review, which will, presuming that we vote to approve something like it, will make our intentions as clear as they can be. And I will try to make it as point positive as much as possible.
Thank you for entertaining my nudge.
Thank you for
Anything else,
nudging.
Kaylin?
Nope, that's it.
Okay, thank you. And thank you, Council, for all of your engagement and all the meetings that you attend on behalf of our citizens. Moving on to section 6, approval of the minutes from February 23rd, 2021, regular meeting. Is there a motion?
I will move to approve as written.
Thank you, Mike. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Karen. Discussion?
I just had 2 things. Summer took care of them. Thank you, Summer.
Thank you so much. I will call for the vote. Karen?
Aye.
Kaylin?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
Ronnie?
Aye.
Tawny?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. We are in section 7 of our agenda, old business, 7.1, sewer rate change for institutions. I want to point out that this is discussion and direction. We have had a lot of discussion on this one, and council, we all need to be really clear with staff moving forward regarding these water rate changes. So first things first, staff needs to hear clearly from all of us if we would like to pursue, if we do, as you know, a majority have an appetite to change these rates. And if so, we have already read in our packets that there are 3 options for consideration. And it's important for staff to hear what the preferred option would be moving forward so that they are not drafting something that then they have to go back to the drawing board about. And so I would just like to thank staff for the work on this agenda item, but first things first to the council. I'm looking for consensus for this appetite to change the rates. Ronnie?
I asked a bunch of questions on the shared document that I thought would help educate me because I kind of need answers before I can choose an option.
Well, hold on. Before we even talk option though, what I'm really asking for is it's really important from staff to make sure that we do have the appetite to change. So before diving into which option, staff needs to hear from us that we do in fact want to change the rate.
I'll let someone else go because I can't answer that question until I have some answers about these numbers.
Oh, okay.
I will start by saying, yes, I have the appetite to change.
Okay. Well, I'm comfortable with, you know, staff entertaining questions to get you to that place. So I'm sorry if it felt like I cut you off there.
Okay, I don't know if anybody else has these questions, but I read through everything. Joel, because this only comes up once in a while, sorry, some of us get forgetful, so I'm just hoping you might be willing to recap and just remind us, you know, why in recent years it was considered okay to charge, and I realize you haven't been here that long, but to charge institutions the commercial rate versus the residential one, and just if you could just give us a really simple recap on kind of how you sense the rest of Utah deals with it.
That's a good question. We've asked that kind of in the past, and I'm staring off over here because I'm looking up at my monitor we have some, we asked this in the past, and we went back and we pulled all of the sewer rate history. We provided that for you guys a while ago. And historically we had a institutions category, and in I think it was 2017. I'd have to pull it up again and look at it. But when the new rates were adopted, it was removed, and I don't know why that was. And so, going forward from 2017, they didn't have that grouping. We have historically had it here. It's not uncommon for us to have it here, and so it's more of a question of do we want to put it back? I can't honestly tell you why. We went back and watched the minute or the footage, and we read the minutes trying to determine, and to be honest with you, I think we hired a company to do the analysis. They did the analysis, they removed it. I don't think anyone realized they removed it. They adopted the new rates and they went into place. I don't think anyone intentionally removed it. It was a part of a discussion because no one talked about it. And I don't think people realized they were doing it. So that's the best I could tell, trying to do homework.
Is what historically would have fallen in as an institutional rate consistent with one of these 3 options?
They historically, in some of the years when we went back and went through, some years there was actual church categories, something like it just kind of been all over the place. It wasn't like one consistent idea. And then in 17, they got rid of it. Some years they had churches, other years they had schools. And it's just, as time went by and they adopted new rates, it kind of always just got switched around. We're required, as we redo these, like this, we've all done this analysis through Zion's Public Finance. We're required to hire someone to do this analysis. It's beyond our technical ability. And so I think what happens is you hire a group to do your new rates, you hand it off, they hand you something back that looks good, and most cities end up going with it. And so I don't know that there's ever been one comprehensive idea throughout the rates to say, yeah, that was how we've always done it, because I don't think that's the case. How they've always done it was they gave it to this other group who did it and gave it back to them. That's how they've always done it.
Okay, well, one of my numerical questions was, it wasn't clear to me when I looked at option 3. In that option, does the city take the $17,000 in the general fund, or do we just, as a whole, have $17,000 less in sewer revenues?
No, so in option 3, there was about approximately $288,000 that we gained in revenue from our rates. We would lose that 17,000 out of that, so you'd have approximately 280,000, which seems like, oh, that sounds fine. But the reality is, last year we had budgeted, prior to COVID, $1.5 million in sewer improvements. That 288,000 in its entirety was going to go towards that 1.5 million in sewer improvements, and the remaining 1.2 was going to be bonded for. So the 288 looks like you have a black number to work with, but really it's a red number, because what you're applying it to is always in the hole. So, you know, I don't really, you know, I don't want to try to persuade one way or the other. I just want to give factual information. So the question isn't, is it coming out of a black number? It's not. It's coming out of a red number. The question to me really is it so red? Is $17,000 making a difference? I don't know that. That's a question for you guys from a policy standpoint.
Okay, and then just one last one. So Zion's gave us some numbers, you know, that that showed, you know, what it would be like for our revenues to be 20,000, or, you know, I don't know, it's like 20,000 as opposed to the 17 or something, and 25 versus with rate changes. But can you maybe just explain why we got that? Because it almost seems like a different animal than this specific request for institutions, but I may have just misunderstood that, right? And I understand that they talk a little bit about inflation and how some communities provide for 3% inflation, but then I got myself really confused, because I feel like at some point we did get, and correct me if I'm wrong, a chart showing us how sewer rates would increase over the next 5 or 10 years. And so I kind of thought that was either built in, or we already kind of knew where we were headed. So I got really confused about why we're looking at yet another number.
Essentially, you're right. If we don't do anything, if we change nothing, they are going to increase over time to keep up with inflation. So that's happening, and you've seen that. What this is saying, if you change it and you lose approximately $20,000 a year, this is what you have to change now to pick that back up, that 20,000 back up, and then keep on that inflation rate, that chart you've already seen, to keep on pace with what you were projected to do before. Otherwise, you'll still adjust them 3% going in, but you're always going to be down whatever you're losing in this rate change that you're doing right now that kind of nudges it down a little bit.
Okay, and final thing was just to repeat one question. So historically, we think we had an institutional rate, but would that have been, I don't know, somewhere in between the residential and the commercial? Was it its own thing, or was it really much closer to the residential? I'm just trying to figure out, like, historically with what we've done, and it's not necessarily that we were doing the right thing, but I didn't know if option 1, 2, or 3 was closer to that. I guess 2 or 3. But
I smile because I'm really trying to read the tea leaves with a lot of that.
Okay, don't worry about it. I'm going to pass to someone else. Thank you.
No, there's times when there was a church rate in there, and there's not a church rate the next year, and we don't adopt fee rates or changes. This is back in the 90s. We're like, it just goes away. And there's times when it just popped back in there without changes. And I'm like, I don't know if someone was just going in there and saying, hey, we need a church rate. And that's how they did it back then. They just put it in because they needed it. Or if someone went in and said, hey, we don't want it anymore. I can't really tell you that. And so there's just no consistent pattern to the 3 decades prior to like 2000. It's just complete chaos, to be honest with you.
Okay, well, I guess my closing question then is, from your experience at other communities, how do they deal with this?
Everyone does it differently, to be honest with you. And to be honest with you though, Ronnie, everybody does it the exact same way. Everyone hands it over to a public finance institution who calculates their rates, and then they adopt what gets handed to them, because no one wants to take the legal liability or the risk of not adopting what someone who's paid to do this and is approved to do it gives you. So, when Zion's Public Finance gives us rate studies, that's all they do all day. None of us do that. I'm not going to go in there and start changing it and put my risk and liability to it when I don't even know what I'm doing with that stuff. So it's not really that cities have policies with this as much as whoever you hire tends to be what they go with. But a lot of places do have institutional numbers, and a lot of places do have institutional rates. It's not uncommon. It's common, and it's just probably 50-50 where they don't have them. So it just kind of depends on who you're looking at. It can split either way.
But Joel, to Ronnie's point, does it fall closer to the residential rate or a commercial rate?
It's usually in the middle somewhere. I'm sorry, I missed that. That was the question you were asking me. I apologize for that. No, it's usually in the middle of those two. And
then can we clarify how many institutions we are changing this rate, this 17, that we'd have to pick up the $17,000 to $24,000?
So the rate change, option two was to change the rate. Option 3 was to change it and then spread it across. Option 2 was to spread it across. That rate change would be approximately 53 cents a month on a standard residential unit, and that would average out to be $6.39 more annually per residential unit.
No, I'm sorry, Joel. How many institutions, churches are we dealing with to recoup this $17,000?
It's approximately 10.
10 churches?
There's 9 churches and one educational institution.
Other questions or comments?
I have a question. So this is more a question for staff, but if any council members have engaged on this, it seems like there's also, like, in our ideal world, we would treat everyone fairly and we would charge them for the services they receive. And so it seems like there's also plenty of businesses that also don't have the seasonal fluctuations in business, even though we are in a tourist economy. There's accountants and so forth. Has any consideration been given to billing based on just seasonality rather than on type of business? It seems like we focused on the squeaky wheels. And they are nonprofits, but just in terms of looking at it from a purely equitable allocation of costs, I wonder. Joel.
Well, I'm trying to make sure I understand what you're asking me. A seasonality analysis of cost. I think what you're asking me is just basically off what water they use based off the season, regardless of classification.
Well, what I'm saying is that the argument of the churches, as I understand it, is that their indoor water use does not vary with the seasons the way many businesses do. And so in that respect, they are like residences and it would be more equitable to charge them as such.
That is,
there are many for-profit businesses that also share that characteristic.
There's 100%, that's their argument, is that they're using their water not within their business, not within their institution. It's not going into the sewer system, so therefore they shouldn't be charged through a sewer impact. These are the squeaky wheels. That is what the analysis was done on, based off those who were coming to the table and what we were kind of directed to do. I'm sure that there are commercial users who could fall into this category. I'm sure there's commercial users who don't fall into this category as well.
Oh,
And
yeah.
and we're just throwing away the opportunity to meter sewer, correct? We're not looking at that as an option.
That's a complete overhaul to our system.
Well, it would be, it would be at their outflow. It would be a cost to the church if they wanted to meter their outflow.
Yeah.
And we're not looking at that at all, right?
They didn't ask if they could meter their own outflow. We don't meter outflow.
Joel, I'm just curious, do you have, and you probably, sorry, you probably might not know, maybe do know, but what would that cost be? Or would Chuck have that answer? I mean, I wonder if it would be worth it for them to pay for it.
I don't know.
All like to pay for what we're using, really.
I don't know that, Karen. I don't know that Chuck or Levi would, or Obi would as well, because it's not something we do on. I mean, it's not like we're maintaining a similar system. Like, we're not doing that on any level. I'm sure we could get that number, but I don't think anyone could just tell you standard, oh, that would be about this much. We just don't do any of that.
I feel like there's a lot of questions here, but in the interest of time and because we have 2 more marathon days, I just want to ask, is there an appetite to change? And if so, what's the preferred option? And if we need more time to think about this, then we can push it to another council meeting. If there are this many more questions, if council's just not yet ready to take action, if there's no action, the item is agended as discussion and direction. So if the direction is give us some time to think about it and then put it on the next agenda, that's direction too. Yes.
Real quick, Mayor. The reason it's discussion and direction is because if we do option 1, there's nothing to be done. If we do option 2, we will bring you an ordinance that just changes the categories. If you do option 3, where we change the categories, if I keep the order right, and the rates, then it's a completely different process with the public hearing. So we're only bringing this to you this way because it literally will change the process of how we go about changing it. And we just need to know what steps to take in order to bring you the proper process.
Well, I think it's important to note that when we set these rates, they weren't discriminatory. Churches were, if I remember correctly, they weren't called commercial, they were called non-residential, which is an accurate description. And it's our fiduciary responsibility to make sure that these enterprise funds fund themselves.
Can you zoom in? Actually, Joel, will you share that again and zoom in? That was interesting.
What should I say again?
I cut you off at fiduciary.
Oh, I said it's our fiduciary responsibility to make sure that these enterprise funds operate in a manner that support themselves. And if what Joel is telling us is right, and that deficit compounds itself over time, if we cut somebody's rates, we're responsible to make it up somehow.
So option 3, I mean, in your mind is not, it seems like it's not even an option, which is for the city to take on that burden and to pay for it out of our funds. Correct?
No, I don't think that we should pull it from the general fund to make that up. I guess if the appetite is there for change, I would go for the most middle of the road change, because because it looks like to me that that gives us some increased revenue over time. But I don't like just giving that money away, because it increases our I went blank. What's the term I want? It just it increases our debt down the road.
How are others feeling? Karen?
So Emily, I'm not interested in picking up the difference for the city. I think that is, like Tony said, I think that's irresponsible. So the choices, it feels like, are 1 and 2, which is we either have the churches continue to pay the rate that they're paying, or we're putting the burden on the rest of we're increasing all the other residential rates and commercial rates to come up with that $17,000 and then eventually to $24,000 over the next couple of years. So,
and that was estimated at like $6 each.
Right. I would not feel comfortable raising people's rates without, them having to say, and also really understanding that their rates are being raised because we're giving a better rate to the churches in order to do that. So
we're essentially giving a better rate to 10 users at the cost of everybody else.
Mike?
I just want to emphasize, guys, you're missing the point, all of you. It's not about churches. It's not about institutions. It's about the city charging the most accurate way for different kinds of water use for any account holder, sewer account holder that we have. If you guys were operating a church or any kind of entity, I don't care what it is, it could be a nonprofit of your choice, and you were paying, let's say, $100 a year or whatever, and then all of a sudden back 3 years ago, all of a sudden you're paying $500 a month in the summertime kind of thing. And you said, oh, gee, guys, we made a mistake. We now classified you as commercial. Eat it. I mean, that's just not fair. I strongly move that we support option 2.
Okay. Others? Kaylin, then Ronnie, then Karen.
So just to respond to that a little bit, my previous question was geared towards the fairness, because we're talking about 10 institutions, not all the sewer users that don't have seasonal variation in their indoor use. So I take a little bit of umbrage at that, but so I realize that I'm unclear. So this is another question. Was there an institutional rate that was different from commercial and residential in the past that was more middle of the road as you're describing their use?
Yeah, I can show you that. That was what I dropped it there a minute ago. If you see in 87, 82, 87, there was a commercial.
Yeah.
And then in 95, they went to this institutional, which wasn't commercial, but it was higher than residential. And then in 98, they did this awesome idea of letting the city manager determine rates. I'm not in any way proposing that as a good idea. And then in 99, it just falls off. In 2016, it comes back as institutions. And in 2017, it the institution falls off again. So it basically in 99, 98 through 16, they were being charged as a residential unit. And Mike makes a good point that they're probably not a commercial user, but the counter to that is they're not a residential user either. And what we were asked to bring back, which is what we've done, is to create an institution category, but to do them under the winter rate structure, which essentially is putting them in the residential category as an institution.
I am sensing from this council that the majority are not comfortable with amending the rates and paying for it out of the city budget, or taking that loss. And it sounds like also that passing it on to residents doesn't quite feel supported either. It seems like Mike is in support of number 2, and that's what I'm hearing clearly. But that I'm not hearing that consensus among everybody else. So I need some real direction here from you others. I'm hearing, Karen, you are not comfortable with passing it on. So you're not, I'm hearing from you that you don't have the appetite to change.
Well, so Joel, can I ask, from 99 to 2016, what they were just residential, is that correct?
Yeah, there
And
was
so
no
right
category
now-
for it.
And we do not have an institutional rate, is that correct?
In 99, they got rid of it. In
No.
2000
Now, currently, we do not, we only have.
Correct.
Yep. In 2017, when we adopted our new rates, they no longer were allowed to use the winter rate average, which was the residential, and they just were lumped into commercial.
And I mean, I really feel like it's almost just to do an institutional rate, but I know that's going to take an enormous amount of work to staff and giving it back to Zions. I mean, this has been years.
Yeah, we keep going back and forth about this. And Tani, I'm hearing from you that you're also feeling the same way, that maybe you don't have the appetite to change.
Joel, let me ask you another question.
Mike, please let Tani speak to my question.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Two's the least distasteful to me. I don't like it. If everybody else has appetite to change, that's what's the least distasteful.
Okay, and Kaylin, I'm not sure where you are. And Ronnie, I'm not sure where you are. Ronnie first.
Sorry, Joel, I'm going to try and explain this as well as I can. I guess on some level, I had a question in the shared document about kind of devil's advocate questions, but on some level, some people would look at this from the outside and say, okay, get every community hires someone like Zions, to redo our rate structure. And, sometimes we're not specialists at all this, so you don't realize that something's changing or how it's changing, or maybe you do, but I don't know that any of us did. So I kind of get the sense that when that changed in whatever it was, 2017, that yeah, some of them definitely got sticker shock because things did seem to go up astronomically, and the feeling was, well, I'm not sending that much more water down the sewer pipe. Maybe it's watering my grass. So what becomes difficult for me to figure out is, when the math was done, do you think in 2017 everybody's rates were figured out and they were put in that commercial category for all the numbers to work out, assuming they would fall in somewhere where they do? They're paying that allowed everybody else's rates to be slightly smaller. See what I'm saying? I'm just trying to figure out, is like the 17,000 a real cost? I mean, is that really what it cost us to process their water that's flowing, or was it when the original math was done? So I'm just trying to figure out if, what am I trying to say?
What you're trying to say is, by moving them into the commercial category, did that offset what everybody else was paying? I would argue that no. I would argue that they're not a residential user, and they've been in a residential category since 1998, and they had 20 years of underpaying, and they got moved into a commercial category. And when you got a free lunch for 20 years, you don't want to pay for the lunch you got for free for 20 years. And so now we don't like the rate we have now because it's much more than the rate we had. Well, the rate you had was probably drastically too low for what you should have been paying for 20 years.
And it's a loss of revenue. So we have projected revenue based on these rates. And if we change the rates, we'll have a less revenue than we projected we would have.
Yep.
Okay, so
less or less, depending on if we were to look at some wiggle middle.
It would, isn't it, or putting the burden on the rest of the ratepayers?
It's the burden on the ratepayers, or it's the burden on the city to pay for a rate study,
right.
or it's a or it's a burden on somebody. And right now it feels like a burden on this council because it's really a tough decision to make, but a direction that this staff really needs from you all. So Kaylin, where are
Can I
you?
ask two more questions? So Joel, are you saying that as best as you can tell, the most equitable rate for these types of institutions would be one that doesn't exist, that's in between residential and non-residential?
Yeah, I think if you were to actually go over this and fix this correctly, you give it back to Zions and you redo the entire poll, because I think you are having people who are gonna, the squeaky wheel is getting addressed. I think there are other people who fall into the category that they're creating. And I think if we want to fix it, then you go back and fix it. I don't know that giving.
Let's just be clear about what that price tag is.
Oh,
Yeah, that was my next question, is how much will
What
it cost for Zions to do that work? Do you have any idea?
I haven't done a rate study in quite a few years, but they're not cheap. I mean, they're usually right around six figures. They're 80 to 120, if I recall correctly from the last one we did.
That
Okay.
was quoted to us before.
Okay,
I thought it
so
was like 70,000.
one thought that I had is that if we're doing it out of sequence, that the cost of the rate study be amortized into the ratepayers who are asking for it. So another idea that is, if it makes so much of a difference, do customers have the option of getting a second hookup to run their irrigation water and then get billed off their meter that they're just using for interior water?
If the churches had an irrigation hookup, they would not be having this issue whatsoever, because they're being billed right now off their water use. And if their water use was not being used in anything but the internal use of that building, that's all going into the sewer system.
Right, so that would be the cost of a second hookup, as well as the connection, whatever plumbing is needed to hook it up to their irrigation system and differentiate the two.
But then would we have a different rate for that? Because the whole. it would
No, but their sewer would just get billed based on their interior water usage, as it is with residences. But this is probably mainly an issue for institutions that have big, disproportionately large lawns.
Yeah, but it'll be labeled. So if like just going down that, like, let's say the church gets two connections, both connections are still going to be called commercial, and they'll run the water on the irrigation connection and they'll still be billed at the irrigation or at the commercial level.
But the difference, Mayor, is right now under the commercial, they're being billed off what their culinary use is, because we assume under a commercial status that that's going into the sewer. If they had an irrigation that was running all of their exterior use, all would they be being billed off is that culinary meter, and all of that would be internal. So it would be absolutely accurate at that point.
But we wouldn't bill them as we don't have an irrigation category.
That wouldn't be us. They would be getting irrigation from a secondary irrigation.
Moab Irrigation Company?
Wait, no, that's not what I was suggesting. I was suggesting
we're saying culinary.
By differentiating the culinary use from the irrigation use, the sewer can just be billed off the culinary use, which tends to be much less. And presuming their claims are accurate, it's stable over time.
That would work the exact same way as the secondary irrigation, because you'd have two separate meters running two separate operations. One would just be billed as culinary water, one would be used to use your sewer. But we as the city are not, I mean, they would have to be bear the cost of putting that second meter in.
Right, and so I'm just wondering what the cost benefit is.
No, to be clear, if a church put in a second meter and they were drawing the same culinary water, they could spray it all over their lawn or they could flush it down their toilet. It would be the same rate as their other meter, because we do not have and do not differentiate.
You're not listening.
Mayor, if you have two meters and this one's just running all the irrigation, we'd bill just off irrigate, we just bill that for use. If this one's running into the building, we would bill off the use for that one, but we would also use that one to calculate the sewer rate.
If we build off for use, what would that rate category be?
We're not talking about water rates. We're talking about sewer rates.
What would that sewer rate be?
It would be the exact same as it currently is. The rate wouldn't change.
Right.
They get less, so they wouldn't be charged as much.
Yep. They
But
would only be charged for their internal use under Caitlin's scenario.
But you would still run into your deficit problem. So you would still have that loss of revenue that you would have to deal with throughout the rest of the users.
So there would be a different category on their bill for that sewer? For
They'd
that
be getting
second
two water bills.
And that second water bill that's for irrigation, what would the category be?
It'd just be a water connection.
And we
This
would.
is all hypothetical. We don't have this anyway.
But I'm just saying, like, we would still, they would still get stuck with the same bill.
But the sewer bill
They
would be
wouldn't.
less.
We would get stuck with the loss, but it would be accurate as could be.
Because they're not going to be charged as much. They'll be charged at the same rate, but they won't be using as much.
Yep.
So it'll be just their internal sewer use, which they're actually dumping into the sewer, is what they'd be charged. Right now, the problem is they're getting charged sewer for their irrigation, which isn't going into the sewer.
I totally get that, but I'm just saying, if somebody who lived in a house, whether it was a church or otherwise, got a second connection, they would get a bill in the mail from Moab City where they were paying for their culinary. And then Moab City would say, also, you got this sewer fee. We don't care where the water's going because we don't have a category for that. That's the whole point of this conversation, that we are measuring your sewer use based on your water use. There is no category. If somebody approached the city right now and said, I just have a water connection and a lawn hydrant, and all I do is water my field. I don't even have a house on my property. We would say to them, we do not have a category to not charge you sewer. They would be charged a sewer rate because that is how our sewer rates are calculated. So bifurcating the line would not help the churches, is all I'm saying. That is not helpful.
Mayor, can I move to table this until our next meeting?
Taking action on this, so it's just, you would just be stating your direction is to keep thinking.
It seems like we have a lot of more to discuss on this.
I know we do. And so
it's making me think that we're not getting clear information. And I don't know when we're going to have the time to be able to figure this out.
Well, I think what staff needed from council, and I recognize that it's very difficult, but staff really needed direction at this meeting to either move forward or not move forward. And if moving forward, how you all wanted to structure it. And we've had enough conversations now, and we've asked enough questions. So I really would love for you all to give staff direction, unless you're just saying, we just need to think about it for a little bit longer. So direction could be no appetite for change or appetite for doing, exactly what the agenda says. Kaylin.
I'm not up for, if I did any of them, I would only be comfortable with 2, but I'm not up for the 6-figure cost for the recalculation.
So, Mayor, if I may ask Joel one more question.
Thank you for sharing that. Hold on. I just want to hear from everybody because, Mike, we know where you are. So, Ronnie?
Yeah, I wish this was all different because it does seem like it might have been more fair to have an institutional rate in the middle. So it's a learning lesson, this whole process. I don't know. I didn't get a lot of email on this, but the resident I heard from didn't think it was fair for other residents to have to make up the difference. So I'm personally still just struggling with what it means for the city to swallow that, and if it is a real cost or just one we imagined. So I'm stuck somewhere in considering 3, but
to address,
stuck. I don't like it.
It is a real cost. It's just one bite of the elephant.
Yeah.
Is that enough direction, Joel, to move forward?
It sounds to me like bring back option 2, and then we can hash that to death and decide if that's what we want to do and vote it down or vote it up and then be done with this issue.
That's what I'm hearing as well. So if you could prepare option 2 and then council, it's not hard to prepare option 2, correct? It's not too much work. And then at our next council meeting, you'll either vote in favor of it or opposed to it, and then we move on. So council, I'm asking you to please prepare for voting on that option.
Wouldn't it have to go to a public hearing though? Because it'd be a rate change.
We'll put it,
Okay.
we have 2 weeks, so we have time to get the public hearing.
Thank
out
you.
before
Well,
then.
wait, so just clarification, is preparing option 2 mean they're going to have a quote from Zions to do the work?
Option 2 is to raise the rates to 53 cents approximately per month on each residential unit and across the board with that letter that was in the packet. That's what option 2 is, not to do an entire analysis of the whole system.
And I'm sorry, I forgot about the public hearing. I do know that we are public hearing heavy at our next meeting, but so be it. It just might be a little confusing.
There really is an option 4 that Kaylin keeps alluding to, and that would be to just redo the entire rate structure and do a whole new public finance. The $80,000 overhaul. And Kaylin's not suggesting that, but he keeps saying this is something else that's out there, and it is. Where our rates were just adopted and we just paid for that 3 years ago, it didn't seem like it was a wise road to go down, but we could do that.
Ambiguous? Okay.
Is it possible to get a quote and then we can make that decision?
I already put that in my notes, Karen, absolutely. I put option 2, need cost of the new study, public hearing, so I already wrote that down.
Mike?
Joel, if none of this had ever come up, in how many years would we order a new full weight study anyway? 1 year, 2 years, 5 years? How long?
Based off the history of Moab City, they were going about, they did one in probably 98, 99. The next one was 2016. So they're about 15 years apart, usually.
10 to 15 years.
Yeah.
Okay.
Some cities do them more frequently. Cities who are really responsible with this stuff, they'll do one, and they did what you guys did last time, where they build in the increase over a number of over time. They don't have to do them as often because they're automatically getting that rate increase based off of the percentage, and so they can go 10, 15 years, and then they do another one.
Okay, so I'm going to stop this now, and I'm saying we are moving forward with option 2 that will then lead to a public hearing at our next meeting, and then an agenda item, and the council will decide in 1 month whether or not to say yes or no to an ordinance that would change the rates to move the churches back to the residential category, and then put that financial burden across the board of residential ratepayers. Yes? Okay. Moving on to our next agenda item, and thank you all. That was really difficult work, and you all did a great job. Section 8, new business. 8.1, award of the 2021 Moab Arts and Recreation Center heating, ventilation, and air conditioning bid to Eco HVAC LLC in the amount of $54,381. Is Levi? Oh, hi, Levi.
I'm here.
Welcome. Thanks for sticking around and presenting this agenda item.
No problem. Does council want a brief history update from then till now?
Yep, go for it.
All right. So there are 5 furnaces at the mark, 2 which failed back early winter. Another one is in poor condition. The area is currently without heat are the solarium, the upstairs stage, half of the upstairs stage, and the east side offices downstairs. The offices downstairs are currently using space heaters. So the places with heat would be the dance floor upstairs. The renters have heat, and then half of the other stage. We reached out to local vendors for a quote, and those quotes came back high enough that we were required to put it out to bid. During that bid process, we conducted walkthroughs with the vendors. During that time, we discussed heat pumps, hybrid systems, and we came to the conclusion that that they were extremely expensive. Reached out to one of the vendors, and his price almost tripled the cost versus natural gas. So we conducted the bid opening, reviewed, and we rated those bids. We're currently operating without a sustainability director. We don't have a sustainability policy regarding replacement projects like these. Not to mention operating under restrictions, COVID restrictions, and a tight budget. Been trying to cut costs, so that's why we came up with this recommendation.
Thank you, Levi, for presenting that.
You're welcome.
Ronnie?
Can you just remind us what the lifetime is? You know, if we replace these furnaces, I don't know what you can expect nowadays for them to.
I think the lifetime. I think that's kind of hard to put a number on, but I think the typical is 5-year warranty, labor, maintenance, equipment. The equipment might be limited to a year.
Tony, did you have a question?
I did. If we go with this bid, Levi, is this a good fix for what's happening? I mean, we're not going to be doing this again in a year and a half.
No, so that's kind of where we're at now. We've been limping along. We expected these systems to fail. We had it on the building improvements project pre-COVID bid or pre-COVID budget. We had it to upgrade the system then. Then COVID hit, so all that went out the window. We were hoping it would limp along until we didn't have to do an emergency situation, and we didn't make it there. So this should be the fix. This will be the fix.
Okay.
We're gonna make sure it's done right this time.
Comments, questions? Kaylin?
So I hear you that the heat pump option was significantly more expensive. I attempted to look up some of the model information that was provided in the bid, but I kind of just had to guess as to what was model number and what was what. But I'm wondering if there was any consideration of more efficient AC units. So like not changing the technology, but within the technology mix that you selected, just the cost and efficiency trade-offs for a little bit more efficient AC units.
Right. Yeah, we went with vendors' recommendations. It's also my understanding that in the future, with these systems installed, in the future, we could swap out the condensers and go green at that point. However, I don't have that cost. I don't know what that cost is.
Any comments or questions or motions? Tony?
I will move to award the 2021 Mark HVAC bid to Eco HVAC LLC in the amount of $54,381.
Thank you, Tony. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Karen. Discussion? Seeing none, I will call for the vote. Ronnie?
Aye.
Kaylin?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
Karen?
Aye.
Connie?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. Thank you, Levi. Have a good night.
Thank you, council. Thank you, Mayor.
Condition 8.2, consideration of an interlocal agreement. by and between the City of Moab and Grand County with respect to joint planning for and funding of the Technical Planning Assistance Program Funds Cooperative Agreement. This is a briefing and possible action. Chuck. I see
good
you
evening,
in the daily this evening.
It's a little windier out there tonight than this picture might show you, but it's still a
Yeah.
nice place.
Also, Summer, you can go ahead and release Levi. That's quite a serious picture we got of him.
Yeah,
Yes, Chuck.
yeah. So good evening, everyone. If you'll recall, this is a technical planning assistance grant that Grand County had applied for. And we've been talking about this for over a year. Back when Zachariah was at the county, he came and made a council presentation back when we had the in-person meetings. So we've been working with the county and with UDOT to develop a scope of work for this plan. It would involve the city contributing $15,000, which we budgeted for, the county contributing $25,000, and then the state giving a grant for $110,000. And what I'd like to point out, the difference between the soon to be completed regional transportation study that UDOT conducted and this study, the unified plan, is that the regional plan is UDOT's plan. They maintain control of project management. They maintain control of the scope of work, and they chose the consultants. This planning assistance grant, this will be our plan. This will be the city and county's plan. We have developed a scope of work that UDOT has agreed to. The county will go out to RFP for an independent consultant, and then this city staff and county staff will come together, evaluate those qualifications, and make a recommendation to hire a consultant, and then the city and county will jointly manage the project. UDOT will be there sitting at the table. And I think the message I wanted to emphasize to you to just, talk about the elephant in the room is there's nowhere in the draft scope of work that we say the bypass word. I mean, it's very clear to me that council doesn't want a bypass discussion anymore. And if ever, and I replied to Ronnie today, one of her in the comments, I said that staff won't bring up bypass. However, we've got 3 public meetings, 2 community surveys as part of this draft scope of work. If the public brings it up, it'll be on the record, you know what I mean? But it's not going to be an issue. What we're really focusing on are complete streets compatible concepts. We can't get a complete streets plan out of it because it's just too much for this amount of money, but we're going to get a lot of stuff that will help us move towards complete streets. We're also looking at strong emphasis on connectivity and interconnectivity between the state system, the county roads, and the city roads. As an example, I think Kalen mentioned earlier in his report about the frontage road system. I professionally and personally think that's a great plan for us and will help relieve congestion on the highway, but it'll be vetted through this process as well. That may be some synergy with that regional plan, right? If these 2 plans comes out as something in our plan that we like, it increases the likelihood of trying to get funding for that from state and the federal government. It provides a framework for the future. We haven't had a plan that I could find in over 10 years. I'm not saying there never was a plan, but I think it was generally a transportation plan. It generally was addressed as part of the city general plan. I think that this is a very positive move that will set the stage for budgeting, for transportation improvements, as well as for being a very transparent and open process. So with that overview, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I'm grateful for that overview, Chuck. And I do feel like Ronnie had some questions that you did a good job of answering. So thank you for that. I would like to actually give Kalen a moment to reiterate what he said in his council report. This is gonna be nudge number 2. Because I do think that that is important information that helps us make a decision, moving forward here as well. But Kaylin, would you mind just sharing with the council again, nudge, nudge, your intention with a proposed resolution?
Well, as the mayor is nudging me, I will be presenting you with a resolution to make our intentions clear about our intention around a bypass, but also about our need to, as best we can and with realistic tools, make our congestion and pedestrian experience downtown as good as it can possibly be. Potentially, this transportation plan could be a component of that, can contribute to that. I do have some additional questions about it, but maybe I'll just let Ronnie go first, having been nudged.
So, but I did want to just have that be shared as part of a broader scope. And then the other thing I wanted to share too, which I meant to share during my council reports, and I'm sorry, in my haste, I forgot. But I am actually talking to a group about the creation, and with Lisa, about the creation of a Moab app where we could message. I'm really excited about it, so I'm really sorry that I didn't share it. But one component would be, messaging out transportation stuff. It's something that we've talked about for a really long time, so I am taking action on that as well. Not that it's like a big deal, but just that as we're talking about an interlocal agreement and transportation planning, I know that was a piece of it as well, as how we message what we do. So Ronnie, go ahead.
I wanted to thank Chuck for the answers, but I'm going to make a motion now to table this because given the history of everything that has happened in the community with the bypass, and I think it's great that we're working with the county and understand they want to update their transportation plan. We haven't had one for a long time. We'd like one. We definitely want to work together. I think this is all really good. The complete streets stuff sounds great and the compatible connectivity. But at this point, especially through what I've heard about the last regional transportation plan meeting, I have lost complete faith in the openness about the bypass. And I would like to table this until I have something in writing that says the city will not go forward with a bypass and neither with the county, because the county is in the driver's seat on this ILA. And I am past the point of having trust. How many times have we said, we don't want it? And yet in the last regional transportation plan, apparently they were potentially talking about NEPA for one of the existing proposed routes, which are routes we've said we don't want. It's so clear there's nowhere in this valley for a bypass, and I'm so tired of it. I feel like it's actually inherently disingenuous to talk about a bypass at this point in this community. There is nowhere to put it in Grand County that isn't either going to impact a neighborhood, which we've said we don't want to do, or isn't going to be astronomically expensive, and UDOT has told us wouldn't happen for decades if it happened. And I would, many times in meetings, we've said, we want to switch direction. We want to focus on things that are going to make a difference for the residents here in our lifetime, but also hopefully within 3 to 5 years. And I can't be part of anything that puts money towards something that might potentially regurgitate the same 2018 study on the bypass. And I'm not confident, given how stakeholders have been treated in the other meeting. I understand it's somewhat separated, but at this point, I just have lost faith, and as a good show of faith, I need to see something in writing for both bodies that they are not, they're done with the bypass. It's a false promise. I know people love to bring it up. It's like watching the little cartoon Up and yelling squirrel. Everybody turns their head and it distracts them for a while, but it's not viable. And we are in a position where we could be focusing on things that are viable. And I really need to see a commitment that isn't going to show up again. And I need to see it from both bodies, especially since the county's in the driver's seat on this. And therefore I move to table. I don't know if anyone wants to second.
Sorry, a second? Mike, is that a second?
No, it's not a second. It was further discussion
I'm
when
sorry,
you're ready.
stop. Is there a second to this item? Laurie, I've got this. Thank you. Is there a second to this table motion? Okay, that motion fails. I would entertain another motion at this time. Mike, did you want to make a motion?
No, I just discussion.
Okay, well, Karen?
Move to approve an interlocal agreement by and between the city of Moab and Grand County with respect to joint planning for the funding of the Technical Planning Assistance Program Funds Cooperative Agreement.
Thank you, Karen. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Tani. Discussion. Mike?
Yeah, Ronnie, I agree with you completely with one crucial distinction. It's almost academic because the price tag is too large. I do not agree that it's not possible to put some sort of bypass through this valley. Think about the Boston. You guys been out to Boston going into the airport? You know, that was a great thing. Many billions of dollars they spent there. I can see a bypass starting north of town at the river, going underneath Main Street, if you will, all the way south of town. It'd be a great thing. I do agree that a bypass has a lot of advantages, but just not where it's could be visible. And that's the only route through town that I can think of that stays out of geologic trouble.
Where's all the water going to go when we get rains?
Never mind all that. I mean, I'm just saying there is a potential route, I think, right now that might work. But as a practical matter, it's never going to happen. Not in my lifetime.
No, if it's never going to happen, why leave it open so it could be on a list? As we know, things on a list can become projects. They can get funding. What's the big deal about focusing on the things we can do and can do within some years that will be helpful to residents?
You have a point.
Kaylin?
So case in point, bypass sucks all the air out of the room again. I didn't second the motion to table, not because I'm ready to support this, but because I had a few questions I was hoping to answer or to ask anyway, while we have this opportunity this evening. So with the regional transportation plan, and perhaps this was because UDOT was in the driver's seat, but the RFP and the scope was vetted by a committee that included city and county electeds as well as staff. Correct me if I'm wrong, Chuck, but my understanding is that even though it says that we'll consult with each other, but in fact, the scope has been developed by city and county staff and approved by UDOT.
That's correct.
Right. So
and the scope that I sent you 2 or 3 weeks ago,
yeah,
that's the one that's been approved with miniature grammatical changes.
Okay. And so in a couple of questions, I have questions about the scope, but we're voting on the ILA, but because the scope's been improved, I'm not sure if is it possible to amend the scope?
Is it possible to have a conversation around the scope at our strategic planning meeting?
The answer is, if you're asking me, the answer is yes to Kaylin's question and yes to your question, Mayor. And to amend the scope, though, now that we have agreement among the three parties, it would have to be agreed upon by the county and the state again, because that's the term of the technical assistance planning grant that was attached to this, was that all three parties had to agree. Right now, all three parties have agreed, but if you want to make changes, it hasn't been a consultant selected. I mean, so I think it would depend on what the changes were, Kaylin, to be honest with you. I mean, but it is certainly possible.
Okay. So the ILA's kind of puts the county in the driver's seat, it looks like. It gives them like administrative control, and I'm unclear as to how far that extends as far as consultant selection or sign off on phases of the study.
No, well, someone had to be the grant applicant,
Yes.
and the county stepped out and was the grant applicant. And we talked, between Joel and I talked, and Bill and Chris Baird talked about who should be the funding manager. And as busy as we've been, it was agreed if the county wanted to do it, let them do it in terms of being the money controller, but they're not the product controller. I mean, that's kind of outlined in the ILA and in the technical assistance planning grant. I mean, it's a unified plan because we're trying to agree upon transportation issues in the valley because it connects so closely.
Yeah, but we don't.
Well, we don't agree on that one issue, that's for sure. But the city's position is clear to me. I mean, our position is clear, and I think it's clear that this plan is not going to be a mechanism to introduce a bypass study.
Well,
it's what I think.
Maybe not directly, but there's some wording in the scope that again I worry about. So, but that can be handled outside of the questions about the ILA as long as we can still discuss the scope.
Yes.
I noticed that there's a couple small area plans included in the scope though, and it seems like those are kind of significant. I mean, they're called small, but it seems like given that we haven't managed to do much small area planning yet, despite being on the docket for years, I'm wondering about having a transportation planning focused entity doing a small area. Emily, you look impatient, so you
Nope,
cut me off.
I'm pinning. It's pinned.
Okay.
Because I feel like, okay, thank you. You know how much I appreciate this conversation too. And I am pinning. So I'm going to call for the vote now so that we can move forward, as it is 9 o'clock and we still have a couple more things that we've got, including an executive closed session. So I'm calling for the vote. Kaylin.
No, not at this time. Sorry.
Karen.
Yes, aye.
Connie.
Sorry. Yes.
Ronnie.
No.
Mike.
No.
Okay, motion fails. The interlocal agreement did not pass. Moving on to 8.3. Proposed resolution 5-2021, a resolution continuing the local emergency proclamation due to the economic impact of COVID-19 novel coronavirus on the city of Moab. Briefing and possible action. In the interest of time, I will just say that this allows for parklets while Planning Commission works toward the effort of amending land use code. That's, as we know, amending land use code is complicated, and this emergency action allows us to continue parklets. And that's why it's being proposed tonight.
And Mayor, only one thing to note, the difference in the document in your packet versus the resolution that I recirculated today is revised to reflect that Grand County has been moved to a moderate transmission stage. At the time that I prepared the document for your packet, the county was at a high transmission stage. So that has changed in the whereases, and then it changed one small sentence in the other whereas with regard to the social distancing restrictions. But other than that, the resolution is fundamentally the same as it was that it is in your packet. And at that point, if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Karen?
So I mean, I appreciate the efforts that are taking place with the Planning Commission. My hope is that we don't continue to use the Emergency Management Act in order just to delay what we eventually want to happen for the city. Mayor, thank you for letting me know that it is still being worked on. I'm just curious if it's going to be ready when this ordinance
expires.
Yes, expires. Yes.
Yeah. Nora, can you make a commitment to us that we could be at a place by the time this expires?
That is certainly our goal. The Planning Commission will start working on it. It's not completely cut and dry because there's some things that we'll need to consider, like, do we want to limit the number per block, or, how far from intersection? I mean, there's some things that we need to talk through that we're going to do with the Planning Commission. But yes, the plan is to have it to you well before the end of the moratorium.
Nora, I just want to, I was thinking about this earlier, and I want to remind you, and hopefully you can relay this to the Planning Commission, that when we first talked parklets, this council did have a pretty robust conversation about the where and the who to include and the how, and the engineering was involved, and there was lots of discussion already done. So hopefully that can inform the Planning Commission, but we would appreciate the speed.
Yeah, and certainly they will be made aware of the discussions we previously had. There's some other things that come into play when we talk about something that could be more sort of permanent in terms of year after year and how we want to handle it. But yes.
Thank you. And there's no way to do it outside of Chapter 17?
Well, right now we don't allow outdoor dining at all. It used to be conditional use, and it's not. We don't have conditional uses anymore. So I think it's important that we go through this process so we make clear that it is indeed allowed, whether it's on city property or not.
Okay, so we'll stay tuned. I would entertain a motion from the council.
I will move if no one else will. I move to approve resolution number 05-2021, a resolution continuing the local emergency proclamation due to the economic impact of COVID-19 novel coronavirus on the city of Moab.
Thank you, Mike. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Ronnie. Further discussion? I'll call for the vote. Karen?
Aye.
Ronnie?
Aye.
Bonnie?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
Kaylin?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. Approval of the bills against the city of Moab. Is there a motion?
I move to approve the bills against the city of Moab in the amount of $319,428.42.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Karen. 319, that'd be a low bill.
Yeah, 319. It was a little more than that.
Yeah. And seeing no discussion, further discussion, I'll call for the vote. Mike?
Aye.
Karen?
Aye.
Connie?
Ronnie or Tawny?
Oh, yeah.
Tawny?
Aye.
Ronnie?
Aye.
Kaylin?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. We are now at agenda item 10, the executive closed session strategy session to discuss reasonably imminent and or pending litigation. Is there a motion to go into closed session?
So moved.
Thank you, Tawny. Is there a second?
I'll second.
I'll second.
Thank you. I will take that from Karen. I think I heard you first. All those in favor? Nope, sorry. In favor, Tawny?
Aye.
Kaylin?
Aye.
Ronnie?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
Karen?
Aye.
Motion passes. We will now move into